Okay. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Practical HR Brewery Edition. Now, I want to talk all things people and things and things and things and things. So that's what we're going to do. I don't want to leave you hanging any longer. Thanks so much for hanging in there while we jump in roughly 3 minutes behind schedule. But the first thing I want to make sure that you know is that if you're catching this recording, make sure you also check out the YouTube channel that they have going on with all the other links and streams so that you can get a lot of free education. I'm seriously impressed with how much work Andrew and the team do to make sure that everyone in the industry is getting some of these things across the board. So let's jump on in. So why are we talking about these things? Guys, I went to the Facebook page and I hit scroll, and I kid you not, I just scrolled. 5 comments and posts from this community were about HR things. The rest of the things were about operational things like where can I find a tank and where can I do what hops and what kind of color of blah, blah, blah do you need? So I say that because clearly you guys want to talk about it. And I get it because it's crazy. So we're talking about HR things because, like it says on the screen, 1, it varies state to state. I mean, the thresholds are crazy. If you're in California, you need HR things at 5 or more employees. If you're multi-state, multi-site, you're hitting 50 employees, you've got other complexity. It is the reason that businesses go under. And I don't say that to scare you. I say that as a fact. If you saw on the Facebook page, I posted in the invite a bunch of different links to different articles that we're going to go over today. But I share that with you because I don't want you to be the headline. I want you to learn these things right now and then not have to worry about that brand awareness later. Because again, people lose their businesses over these things. So we're going to talk about some really clean, hygienic cleanup things that you can do. Now, outside of that, it's not as scary as it sounds. It's just also not realistic for you to keep up with all of this stuff. And that's why I do what I do, because if you're in a different city, state, right, country, all of these things, they're changing all the time. And guys, let's be real. You Google and politics are crazy. It's an election year. Like, yes, it is not fair for business owners to try and keep up with all of these things. And back to point number 2, it is the reason that people lose their businesses. So I am confident that you are listening to this video today because you are curious. You're like, hey, I don't know what I don't know, but I also want to make sure I don't step in the shit on accident. I don't even know if I'm allowed to swear on this thing, but I will. And we're going to jump into it. So going in to the overview, here's what's on tap for today. Going over some things about me, some industry things that I've already kind of previewed for you, talking about the news, because again, I'm giving you the facts and you're going to stay out of the headlines. We're going to talk about those promise takeaways that were in that invite that you got, and then some summaries. Yes, I have a certification for you because why not? And the resources. So if you are on this chat live and you want some Q&A time, maybe we'll have it, maybe we won't. Can't make any promises because sometimes I'd rather just give you the deets and we can always sidebar, okay? So here I am, a little stretched out, but it's an old picture. So, hi, I am Jessica Hart. I am located in the North Bay. So I am about 45 minutes north of the Golden Gate Bridge in California. My background in beer started with Lagunitas and their merger and acquisition from the Heineken brewery. So I started with them back in 2017 and did a lot of post-merger M&A stuff across the United States. I also facilitated some partnership with a smaller business that they have out in Florida. Why do I share that? Because when you get to that scale, you've got people in multiple states and you got different things. It's crazy. That was 2017. We had 5 sites, over 1,000 employees. And man, I can tell you that that's when I drank the IPA. Like, it was so cool to transition because previous to that, I was HR for Target. You can imagine going from red and khaki to straight up Lagunitas mode was very different culturally. But I also understand the importance of corporate things and then also the scrappiness that is the beer industry. And that's where I really fell in love with just how laid back the culture was. So now I am an HR consultant in the industry of food and beverage, and I specialize in alcohol because I'm not joking. Like, managing people is freaking hard, you guys. Like, you need people to scale your business. You also need people that you trust in all the things. But man, when you throw alcohol into the mix and drinking as a part of your job and you're testing that beer in 4 different spots and then someone's jumping on a forklift, like your world is completely crazy compared to others. So some people, again, like to know the resume and you're like, why am I going to give this lady 100, wrong one. 1 hour, 60 minutes, not 100 minutes of your life. And so here's the resume, amongst other things. So I do have 2 formal degrees. I have 1 formal certification in HR. My degrees are in HR and organizational behavior, and I have a master's in business administration. My formal degree is an HR certification from a university out here in California. I opened my business in 2023, and here's some logos and corporate stuff. So don't worry about that. Outside of those things, I have been interviewed and am a subject matter expert in some different publications for some great journalists that do great work. And so I've been interviewed for the Brewing Industry Guide twice in the last 3 months, and also for Wine Jobs, which is part of Wine Business. And then I was interviewed by them again yesterday. Now, here is a quote that I love, is that I am a firm believer in the people. If given the truth, they can be depended upon to meet any national crisis. The great point is to bring them the real facts and beer. So jumping on into what the heck, why are we quoting Abe Lincoln in this? Let's talk about the industry stuff and in the press. Now, again, when you use HR as a strategy for your organization and you think about the people that are a part of your business just as much as your liquid, it's really important to make sure that you understand like what's going on, because it's going to scale you, or, it could do some other things. So again, this is not you. We're going to learn from other people's mistakes, and I'm just sharing for you a little snip. So jumping in, this is just the facts. So overall, what ends up happening here is that you're seeing in the white, that's 2022, and in the blue, it's 2023. Numbers are going up. You're like, what does this mean? This means that according to SHRM, which is the Society of Human Resource Management, they get data that says, hey, what is the EEOC, which is basically a federal government term, right? It's a group of people on a federal level. What are they doing in terms of lawsuits? Now, here's something that you may not know, is that the EEOC can represent employees when they depart your organization and support them in suing you. They come after you. That is what happens. And you can Google that. I'll also give you the link to these things, because again, I don't like to keep the facts from you. Now, with that, what you're seeing here is that there is an increase, number one, on the left-hand side, of the amount of changes that they have going on and the amount of suits that they have going on. And then number two, you've got the amount of like closed, right, dollars. So let's jump in a little bit further. Here's one. This was open to close in 3 days. So that's why I wanted to share it with you guys. And here's some quotes on the screen. But basically, we all know founders. we all know them. They're great. They scaled really, really fast. And then something happened. They have some crazy tabloids that come out, and it's talking about discrimination and lawsuits with a former employee. Now, here's something that I want to make sure that you hear from me, is that it doesn't matter in the court of public opinion if this headline is correct. Okay, I'm going to say that again. It doesn't matter in the court of public opinion if this headline is correct. This is your brand. This is your employee experience of the current people that work there. And then they see this and they go, wow, am I working at the right spot? What do I need to do? Do I need to jump ship? Oh my God, have they done this to me? Should I get on the lawsuit bandwagon? Like, it's detrimental in terms of experience and efficiency for what you currently have going on, number one. Number two, say this is accurate. Man, do you think that there's people out there in this digital age that want to buy your beer? I will never know the answer to that question. I am just here to produce that kind of thought process for you to understand when people, policy and procedure line up, they either do or do not work. But I think it's important to note that this one was open and closed in 3 days, and they settled it outside of court. Next one up is that there was another wrongful termination and race discrimination case that happened in a brewery. Okay, if you can see the screenshot on here, this is June 2024. This is last month. So this is not me just finding decades worth of old stuff to show you and lead with fear. No, this is like literally happening right now. Okay, so again, here's our friends at the EEOC, what they're doing. What's interesting about this one is that this employee actually was advocating for how another employee was being treated. So they weren't even saying, hey, you're being, XYZ to me, you're being XYZ to them, and I don't like that. And then they ended up firing that person, and then boom, here we go. Just a couple more snips. Again, April 2024. I've also got a July 10th. You guys, 7 days ago, 2024. Okay. Again, here are just some headlines for you, and we're going to keep you out of those headlines. Another one of my favorite quotes, like I said, I'm from California. I am just north of the Golden Gate Bridge, so I had to throw this lovely guy on here. So we brewers don't make beer. We just get all the ingredients together and the beer makes itself. Now, we all know the ingredients for beer. I'm going to talk about the ingredients for your business and your people. We've got 3 different things that I promised I would talk to you about today. I want to simplify this HR madness, and I just want to talk to you about it in pillars. Pillar 1, your people. 2 is your policy. And 3 is your procedure. You probably call it an SOP. All right. So what are we talking about when we jump into people, policy, and procedure? Now, again, practical stuff. I hate when we get on these type of calls and communication and it's like, oh, it depends. And it's super fluffy and it's kind of cloud-like. And then you can't leave with anything of like, what does it mean to me? At the same time, when we're talking about HR stuff, it's really difficult to just blanket conversations. There is a need to tailor it to your organization based on your city, your state, your employee size. Those are really the key things in HR. However, I wanted to give you an example of how these 3 things pivot based off of your business and things to think about in your business. So if you have an on-site physical location, I'm not talking about co-packing, co-brewing, all the things, right? I'm saying, hey, you've got a facility that you own with depreciating assets such as your tank farm and all the things, all right? So you've got on-site workers, but it's considered back of house. What I mean by back of house is that they don't interact with the public. You're not walking the public through caustic, right? Like that's what I mean is like there's a very differentiating factor here. Or you've got a site where you might have your tank farm, your brewery, back of house, and then you have your front of house components such as the tap room. All right. So that's where you're seeing here on location. The next one is if you have on off premise, maybe remote sales team members across the country or in your location, in your region, right? They're driving into different warehouse and distribution sites, and then also remote teams, whether we're talking about admin teams or you outsource accounting or whatever it is, right? There's different things that go on. Now, when we think about the worker and the job that you have done and the location as the first piece, then we apply what happens for the people, the policy, and the procedure. Some people call it strategy, structure, people. Some people call it, different things. I'm just saying it of functionality. If you think about where they work, then we can apply what ends up happening. So let's talk about people, because I think that that's the best part about our brands and what happens in the industry is really the people. I mean, and I say that as someone that pivots between wine industry clients and brewery clients, distillery clients. Like what I love about the beer industry is the culture of the people itself. And I think that the culture really lives in craft and small batch. Okay. Now with that, let's talk about what it means to be taking care of your people. I really think of it as people that are walking extensions of your liquid. You made the liquid. You've got a head brewer or a brewmaster, right, that has made some great freaking liquid that comes out, but the people are actually the extension and walking your brand. So when we're talking about people, these are the key takeaways that I have for you. All right. I want to talk about these 5. And again, I said I'd promise you some practical takeaways. So here they are. If you want to screenshot it, go right ahead. But the first tip is we're going to talk about job descriptions and accountability charts. What I mean by that, it doesn't need to be fancy. It also just needs to be practical. You need, when you are hiring someone, to post a job that accurately depicts what they're doing. You also need to tell people what you expect them to do. You hired them, you gave them an offer letter to do the job on the job description. This helps you as a business owner because when you go to do performance management or you want to say someone's not meeting expectations, you can say, hey, but I gave you this job description. I hired you to do these things and you're not doing these things. So that's the gap. It's pretty clean. When I talk about accountability charts, that's when you have people that are wearing a lot of multiple hats, right? You're like, look, I brew, then we hand keg, then I clock out, then I punch into a different cost center and I take up an extra shift helping the tap room sometimes, or I've got a beer dinner, right? Or whatever. There's plenty of examples there. Now, I say it because what you can do is you can take your org structure and pick 5 pillars of things that are important to you. And you're like, oh, well, this person's also responsible for customer engagement. And this person's also responsible for quality of the liquid. And this person's also responsible for social media, whatever it is. You can show overlap so that people also know who's accountable to what at the end of the day and how they can collaborate with other people to get things done, where there's shared ownership so that people are pulling on the same rope. Tip number 2 is that offer letters, like I mentioned a second ago, but they need to have employment classification. So this is what I mean. If you Google FTC, Federal Trade Commission, you'll see a whole bunch of jargon and madness that's going on right now everywhere. One, California said no to non-competes and all of that in January. Then the feds, who oversee everyone, every state, came out and said, we like that. So we're going to take those non-competes and non-disclosure agreements and, trade secrets, all the things. We're going to change that up. Texas said, absolutely not. So Texas has its own kind of waiting game going on, but the rest of us don't. All right. And that changed. So if you need to Google that, FTC non-compete, go for it. But the reason why I bring that up is because in your offer letters, you're going to go through the job description and you're going to say, like, is this an hourly or salaried role? That's what I mean by employment classification. It's based on your status. So there's a couple different tests that you have to do depending on your state. So I'm not going to speak too specific to it, but basically you have to go through the test you can do it with your HR person. You can do it. You can Google it yourself. You can look at a lawyer. You can do all sorts of things, but basically you go through the job description and it's, how autonomous is this role? Like, does this person take direction all the time? Do we live by checklists? Do I delegate things to them and then they get it done? Or is it like free keys to the kingdom and they do all the things? That's the easiest way to think about it. And so it's, are they hourly, clock in, clock out, or are they salary? They don't clock in, clock out. Now, in the offer letter, you're going to want to say if this is an hourly or a salaried role, or the classification term is exempt or non-exempt. This is going to help you with the question when you get hit with it of why do I have to clock in and clock out, or so-and-so doesn't, or I'm working so many hours and they come in at 9:30 or whatever it is, right? You can explain that some people's roles are monitored based off their employee classification and some aren't. Tip number 3 is that you don't pay for a perk you don't use. So what I mean by that is if you use outside counsel or if you use an outside accounting firm or something along those lines, you want to ask them, what are we paying for, right? Where are our bills going? Are we paying for benefits? Are we accruing vacation? Do we pay vacation out a lot at the end of the year? Do we pay it out upon termination? Is our state that we don't have to pay it out? So then it's not a liability on the books. You want to know what you're paying for. Are you paying for employee benefits? Right? You're paying for employee benefits and you pay for a dependent benefit, but then no one's enrolling their dependents. And so they don't really know from utilization rate that they can actually use this benefit that you've already committed to getting ready to pay for, right? So all that to say is that you want to look at those things so that you make sure that you're not like paying for a perk that no one's using. Because I guarantee you'd love to use that money in another way. And I'm not saying take it away as an employee perk. I'm saying just reallocate the funds and do it in something that makes sense so that you get what you pay for from an employee engagement perspective. Okay. In addition to that, your team should know what Their perks are. So in some states, you have a bring your own device policy where you have to pay for a reasonable amount of their cell phone time or their Wi-Fi time or what have you. Sometimes you might say that I just want to pay for everyone's phone because they're clocking in and out on their phone anyways. And so this is like a way for me to keep up with employee engagement. There's a lot of different things that you can do. But I just want to drill down tip number 3 as just know that the perks that you pay for and get what you pay for out of those things. All right. Because then you can answer the question, they pay X down the street. Why don't I get paid X here? Well, because our total compensation plan is boom, 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 boom. So we're actually paying more per hour, right? We're actually paying more in total compensation. It's just that you, employee, need to use the perks of what we're already paying for. And if they don't want to use the perks, well, then change your strategy and you can pay more per hour, right? You can do all sorts of things. But that's just the tip number 3. Number 4 is when in doubt, suspend pending investigation. Man, okay. What I mean by that is that we know that everyone wakes up every single day and no one says, hey, I'm going to be a jerk today. Hey, I'm going to be drunk on the job today. Hey, I'm going to be a risk for my organization today. No one wakes up and says that. People do people things. That's what makes HR kind of crazy. And so I believe you when you say like, oh, there's just something off about someone and I don't know what to do. So what you're going to do is suspend pending investigation. Now, I say that because when you show as either a manager or a business owner, employer, whatever buzzword you want to use, when you show that you suspend someone pending investigation, it actually doubles down on your safety culture and it puts your money where your mouth is. So I don't want you though so I want to make sure you hear this. I don't want you to suspend pending investigation and then not pay someone. Now, this is going to be a little bit of I want to say controversial, but people have their own thoughts. My advice is to always suspend with pay pending investigation because I'm a big advocate for you are innocent until proven guilty. So because I, as the employer, I'm taking away your ability to work, I am going to still pay you because it is my decision as an employer to make sure that you don't have the opportunity to make money and I took that away from you. So I'm going to pay you pending investigation. Because why? You as an employer are going to buy yourself time to understand what the heck happened. Okay. And so you pay that person to sit at home and do the things while you figure it out. And then you can make a decision from there. I want to also say, number 5, just be obsessed with being curious, right? I see this in ways where you eat in the employee break room. Okay. I see this in ways where it's like, hey, if you stay after work one day and you have a beer at the bar, what do you see? What do you feel? How is that tap room experience, right? I want you to be obsessed with that. I also want to stress, because there are some different size organizations on here where it never looks good to have an office worker, HR professional, accounting person, right? Outside salesperson walk into the brew house without steel toe boots on or safety or PPE when the team that's on the floor has to do that. So be obsessed with the employee experience because you will start to understand where you need to make some shifts in your organization to have better cohesion for the people. All right. Policy. So policy, I know you're like, it's written stuff, it's jargon, I hate it. We write it just to check the box and do the things. Now, I want to make you think about it in a little bit of a different way. It is your established ways of working. It is your proof of expectations. It's a little bit of a CYA, and we'll go into procedures as a CYA as well. But let's talk about some of the practical policy things of why it matters for you. Now, in the invite, I said that we would talk about handbook check stuff. This is the handbook check stuff, okay? So first is at-will employment. It blows my mind. I put this on my LinkedIn probably a month ago, and I made a poll just to really kind of get a pulse on people's understanding. At-will employment is not everywhere. So I want to say that again. At-will employment is not like a federal lay of the land thing. It is something that depends on the state that you live in. And how do I say this? Plot twist. The only state that is not an at-will state is actually Montana. And you can Google that too. So what does at-will mean? At-will means that employee can leave at any time, any day, no reason at all, right? Hey, I decided to work for you, don't want to work for you anymore. It also means that you as an employer can say, I don't want to work with you anymore. You don't work here anymore, right? There's technically no documentation that's actually needed across the board. Now, does it help you? I'm sure there's going to be an employment lawyer that hears this is just like, oh my God, documentation. But like in practicality, does documentation help you? Absolutely. Can you fire someone for something that's gross? Like, oh, they're pregnant, or, oh, I don't like that they go to church on Sundays or whatever. No, you cannot do that. So that's also where documentation helps your claim of saying, look, it was a reason. But technically, you want to go to your handbook. So this is the tip and takeaway. You want to go to your handbook and say, did you show and demonstrate and have the person sign it off that said, yep, we are an at-will employment business, right? And it's because you want to prove that you told them that they knew that upon coming in, that you didn't give them a contract instead of a job offer that had, start and end dates or anything like that. So that's one of the tips here under policy. Number 2 is that you want to have a policy in your handbook about reporting tips over a certain amount. I usually say over $20. Now, why is that? That is because you as the employer in many states have to pay payroll taxes. And what that means is that the employee needs to report that and you accurately have to pay that. Now, I do not do taxes. I have a CPA for myself, and there is a reason that zero of my degrees are in finance. But there is a reason why I want to make sure that you hit this home, is that it puts the accountability on the employee to make sure that they are recording those things for you as the employer. Because I would hate for one of you to get audited and they're like, oh, you owe us all this money in payroll taxes, and the employee walked with it, and now you're footing the bill. Okay. Number 3 is I want you to name 2 different people that should be contacted should there be harassment, discrimination, any sort of like extension of your open door policy type thing. And here's why I say 2. Because if you put all the power in one person and then there's an allegation that it's that one person, or that one person is best friends with so-and-so. And guys, we hire our friends, our family, our cousins, right? All the time. And I say that as someone that met my husband at work and all the things. Okay. So that's why you want to have multiple people as points of contact so that you diversify your risk from an employer standpoint. Tip number 4 is that I want you to give real examples of prohibited conduct. I don't want these copy and pasted handbook answers for you. Things that are an example of prohibited conduct, right? I want you to have, like, you can't spray someone with caustic. You have to use lockout, tag out. You have to ask for their ID when you're serving a beer, right? I want you to be specific on whatever it is for your organization on prohibited conduct, because it gives you and the employee very clear examples. Like, I have a restaurateur client where in prohibited conduct, we write, you cannot talk with a knife in your hand. Because if you guys have seen Bear or anything like that, like, chefs and such, they get heated and all of a sudden you're waving a sword around that's super sharp. Like, that's not how it works. So we do have an example of that with one of my clients. So that's something that I want to also hit home for you. Also, if you read the prohibited conduct or your handbook and you don't, I guess let's take a step back. If you can't tell yourself the last time you read your handbook, your employees probably haven't read it. So you should go read it, because you should know that. And then number 2 is if it's god awfully long, then you should also look at amending that, because when you have real examples of prohibited conduct and you have real actionable policies in there, people read them. And then it also helps you because you can say, yes, I've read this and it's reasonable. 100+ page handbooks, your employees are going to sit down and read that for 3 hours, right? They're just going to sign and move on, and that doesn't help you. Now, another thing is tip number 5. You get to decide, and a lot of people don't know this, so this might be a surprise for you. You get to decide on if you want to use an arbitration agreement or not. it's common in California. Lots of businesses have it. Basically, an arbitration agreement is something that says like, hey, you get to work for us. If something goes wrong, you'll facilitate and work with us to try and remedy those things. And if someone's crazy and a manager is rough or whatever it is, then you agree, employee, that we're going to handle this behind closed doors and we're going to talk it out and we're going to keep it out of the news. Now, as of now, it's legal to do those things. Who knows what it is in the future? You, as an employer listening to this, is like, yeah, that sounds kind of shady. I don't like that idea. Then don't do it. I'm just here to share that is a tip that you just need to know that it exists, right? That's my advice. Next piece. Let's talk about procedure a little bit. So it's what you do, it's how you do it. And again, it's a little CYA because when we have people, we have variables. It's not like we're making widgets, you guys. We've got, especially if you're making like some bombers, like some 40s, like you've seen those explode, like things happen, right? Like things totally happen. And so with that, we need to talk about some procedural stuff that is a little bit of a CYA. So some practical takes on procedure. 1, reasonable suspicion. I cannot tell you how many people in the industry will be like, oh, I think that they've had too much or right or whatever, or I think that they're like, what do I do if I think that they smoked weed on their lunch break or whatever? Like there's all these different examples, right? And the thing that I want you to have is I want you to have a procedure for you, anyone you call a manager, anyone that you call a supervisor, basically anyone that approves a payroll record or a vacation time off or would do a write-up, right? Like think of it like that. A procedure for reasonable suspicion, because then it's easy, it's duplicatable, and you remove someone right away. Again, the reasonable suspicion procedure connects back to that suspension pending investigation, right? You go through your procedure, you go, it's more likely than not that maybe something happened. Okay, we're suspending you with pay, pending investigation. Now we're going to figure out what we want to do with the situation. So tip number 1, have that documented and feel like your team knows what that procedure is. Number 2 is have a very clean, simple matrix. Simple matrix, right? Hey, if you're not here 3 days in a row, that's job abandonment. Hey, if you don't show up on time, and we call clocking in on time after 6 minutes, right? Also, you want to be reasonable. If they're not there on the dot every single day, I mean, you know if someone's left the house longer, like if you're plus or minus like 3 minutes, okay, sometimes things happen. But like if it's more than 6 minutes, they just didn't leave the house on time, right? That's typically what happens. So if you use something like that as a guard or a guide to do performance management, then you can do those things. So hey, if you were late more than 6 minutes, all right, you get just a verbal chat. That's what we do. If it's 2 times in a month, all right, I'm going to write you up. 3 times, right? Like it's whatever works for you and what also is reasonably manageable for you. I'm not saying jump through hoops and make something super crazy, because the reality is you guys have enough business stuff going on. You don't need another check the box activity. Okay. So make it something super simple that your manager could reference if they're like, I don't know what to do. I'm brand new here. All right. The expectation is for me to write someone up if they have a certain amount of these in the next 3 months. All right. Next is tip number 3. Documentation does not need to be fancy. Cannot tell you how many people think that you got to have a form for a write-up and they need to sign it and it needs to be on a PDF and all these things. No one has time for that. It really doesn't matter. And honestly, if you go to court or an employment lawyer, they don't care what form it's on, they care about what it says and that it was documented. Okay. So if you decide that you're the person that's going to coach on the floor, right? Hey, had a conversation with you today. Boom. You can text it to yourself. You can email it to yourself. Do something though that you have to hit the send button. Why? Because if you just have a running note in your phone, I don't know when you updated that note last. But when you want to have proof, hey, I coached you on this day, hit the send button, right? Timestamp. So that's piece number 1. Piece number 2 on that is, say you do want to do a paper document of like, nope, this is a final written warning. Employee goes, nope, not signing it, not a dang chance. The reality is no one needs to sign it. Okay. You just, as the employer, go on the employee part, refuse to sign, date, time, move on with your life. It's not worth your time to try and get this documentation stuff to be signed and done and all the things. If I had Jessica's magic wand, I honestly don't know if I would ask you to do all of these things, because there's plenty of other things that are more bang for your buck and a better ROI on your people. But some people really on like a human level, like they need to check all those boxes and do it. So if that's you, go ahead and do you. I'm just saying that documentation doesn't need to be fancy. It just needs to happen in some way. You can also text the employee, say, hey, we chatted today, boom, hit send. It goes to the employee. You've got proof that you coached that employee. All right. Next up is a bunch of logistics. So my tip number 4 on procedure is going to roll like this. If you are texting someone after hours, do you know what that means? If you have on-call shifts in your city and state, do you know what that means? There are some states where you text them after hours, you are talking about their working conditions. That means you need to pay them. There are some states that there are minimum reporting pay where every time you call and talk to them for 15 minutes about their working conditions, you still need to pay them 2 hours. All right. On-call shifts. There are some states that say you need to pay them for being on call because they can't leave their house. They can't, go on vacation. They can't drive and go hang out in the river because they're waiting for your call and have to change their environment and their situation and their life to try and accommodate your business. So that's up to you. You got to look into that for your specific business operation. But outside of that, I want you to also think about reporting to work and sending home criteria. This is typical in a tap room that doesn't have overlap, meaning you don't have brewers that can serve and have, certification to pour depending on your state. Or if you don't have the complexity on your payroll process that allows you to bill to the brewing department and to like a guest facing work center, right? And you can't pivot in between your hours of what you pay a brewer versus what you pay a taproom employee. But I want you to have a clear procedure in your brain that's duplicatable where it's like, hey, when do we send people home? And do we know what that means? Because again, in some states, when you have someone scheduled for an 8-hour shift, you send them home, you have to give them reporting pay of half of that shift. So if it's an 8-hour shift, you got to pay them 4 hours. There are some places where it's a 4-hour shift, you got to pay them the 2 hours, right? So it really depends. I'm trying to keep it a little broad, but also specific for your curiosity so that you know what to go and kind of Google on your back end work and your homework from this conversation so that you know what to do. There are some states that have what's called a tipped minimum wage. It's not very common on the West Coast, but it is on the East Coast. And so I think that based off of the people I saw that were going to jump in this call today, a lot of people were on the East Coast, which is great. So I want to call out that, for example, in Tennessee, you can have a bartender tipped at like $2.78 or something like that per hour. Now, what that means is that they're paid by the business $2.78 an hour, assuming that the tips that they report are going to make up the rest of the federal minimum wage, up to like it's a little shy of $8, right, an hour, which is also why you have the reporting pay, or I'm sorry, the policy on reporting tips set up, because if your employees are paid $2 and whatever cents from you, and then you're not, and they're not reporting their tips, then that means you as employer, now you might have budgeted them at $2 and whatever cents an hour for your annual planning or whatever. I've seen posts in the Facebook group about looking at percent of operating profit or percent of revenue for your labor hours and stuff like that. Well, it's going to get real skewed real quick if you don't have that policy set where people have to report their tips in this scenario, right? So then you pay the $2 whatever, their tips make it up to the little shy of $8 an hour piece. And then what ends up happening is that they walk with that check, right? Now, if you aren't in a tipped minimum wage spot and you have a city minimum wage or whatever, it's obviously a different scenario. But I wanted to call it out because sometimes in those situations, so for example, back to the Tennessee thing, you can get paid $2 an hour from a business in Tennessee and you're paid $18 an hour if you're in LA. Okay. And because in California, we have zero such thing as a tipped minimum wage, and other states obviously have that too. but there are some states that do have that set up. And I share that because if we take that same example where maybe you have a brewer that then goes, hey, I'll pick up a shift in the tap room to try and help out the team, or it's busy or whatever it is, then you want to code them to that work center. But maybe your brewer is getting paid like $16 an hour and your bartender is getting paid $2 an hour. Now, are you going to pay that $16 an hour plus tips, or what are you going to do? All that to say is that make sure that you have a procedure set up. If you are a tipped minimum state, how you're going to go about people if they're working in different work centers, and understanding of the scheduling piece. Now, tip number 5 is that procedures can change, okay? I don't want you to hear this and go like, man, what am I going to do? How am I going to do it? This is super overwhelming. No, I called it tips for a reason, okay? Business need is number 1 when you're making any of these decisions. What does your business need to do so that you can be successful? Then you start talking about your people, your policy, and procedure. Where are your people working? Which is why I talked about the location in the beginning, to make sure that we're understanding how we're bringing this home. Now, you can tweak it from there. Something that's very common with my clients or people that I work with is that instead of having an employee handbook, especially in states that change a lot, we got a lot of changes going on. And you know what? The feds have made a lot of changes as it is anyways. So I would probably blanket it to say all of you should look at these things. But like your employee handbook, for example, if you have that live in a virtual document, QR code, link on an intranet, right? You can send it through whatever. Then that can be updated on the back end as legislation changes. Because again, I'm really passionate about this. There is no way that you guys can keep up with all of the things. There's no one has bandwidth for that, to keep up with all of the things all of the time and stay compliant with these things. But also it's realistic to say that I know that HR lives in every single one of you, whether you're a manager, whether you're a GM, whether you're a business owner, right? Wherever you're at in the pyramid of things, right? It's an accountability in everyone. So it's more about how do we maintain and stay aware so that we make the changes that we need. Now, if you have a handbook that then is updated via QR code, and you have that QR code right in the brew house or in the break room, or I don't know if I put it in the break room, but like, you get what I'm saying, like put it somewhere available, then you can also say that anytime that you're updating these things, the team can just walk by and scan it, and they have an updated copy right there instead of this old PDF that happened when they joined your team 5 years ago. So that's the last tip that I have for you. We're wrapping it up here. I'm very excited to say that I am right on time in case we do want to do any Q&A. But I do have this reference page set up because, again, I'm not going to talk data, numbers, and things without giving you the resources that I came here through. I also wanted to give you a little certificate because you survived it. You survived talking about HR stuff in the breweries, which this is just kind of a joke, but a little bit of fun because I feel like every time I see something about like HR people, they're like, and there's a certification and we're doing all of these things. So here's a punny joke for you. At this time, I am not hearing that there are any questions, but I will pause for you in case there's anything that you want to throw out there live. I am very active in the Facebook group, guys, so I'm always happy if you post something in there and you want to tag me, and I will answer it right there for the masses to know. I'm happy to help with those things. You can also find me at my website, Jessica Hart, Hart, consulting.com. That's my cell, so I don't put that in my email and stuff, so please reach out to me if you have any questions, and then also my email. Love to hear from you. I totally get it that things are very different via state, city, right, sites, all the things, and I'm just here to help answer any questions that you have about HR things. I do want to say thank you for getting this far and also being curious about how do you put practical HR things into your organization to protect the employee, but also protect you, because it is a crazy world out there and things are out of our control sometimes. And so sometimes it's just nice to put some foundational pieces in place that are stable. At this point, I think we're good on comments. I'm going to say goodbye to you all, let you have the rest of your day. And again, thank you so much for having me on this, Andrew. Appreciate it so much.